Live from the Anajar and Levine Accident Attorney Studios.
The man your man could smell.
Theo Dorsey is theoretically speaking.
But are you a different animal and the same beast?
What does that mean, Kobe Bryant?
Presented by Hard Rock Bet, Florida's official sportsbook. Streaming live on YouTube. Here's Theo Dorsey.
You know, a wise man once said, experience is life's greatest teacher. And I love that, actually. I live by it. It's not wrong. But I would ask that person, have you ever been humbled? Have you ever been humbled? Because I'll be damned. I might put that right there up next to experience. I mean, it's a humbling experience when you are humbled. And if you're wondering where I am pointing this humbling to today, look no further than Lexington, Kentucky, and Big Blue Nation. The once great and mighty Kentucky Wildcats program, that men's basketball program that is held in such high esteem, is now going to be led by a guy named Mark Pope. Mark Pope. We learned earlier this week, that John Calipari was leaving the University of Kentucky, the number one job in all of college basketball, to head to Arkansas, where there is a lot of money and there will be a lot of NIL, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of success in the SEC with the Razorbacks. And when that Kentucky job opened up, woo, you should have saw how Big Blue Nation was tweeting proud and loud. Oh, I'm glad John Calipari is gone. At 15 years, one national title. Big Blue Nation is about to be bolstered up. They're looking at all of the names of these college coaches and legends in the game right now that are going to be the next face of the Kentucky Wildcats. And boy, do they have to feel humbled right now, because I look at my notes here, and Mark Pope, the Kentucky Wildcats, going to be announcing him on Sunday with a press conference at Rupp Arena. Mark Pope, the new leader of the Kentucky Wildcats. And if you're at home right now, or if you're riding around on your ride home, watching us on ESPN West Palm Play, on Theo Speaking, on YouTube, you can always live stream us there. CCAT, myself, taking you from the ride 5 to 6. Here on Theoretically Speaking, if you're at home and you're wondering who Mark Pope is, let me just give you a little taste before I talk about why the Kentucky Wildcats fan base right now, and administration and staff and players and alum, have to all feel very humbled by the fact that they don't have Danny Hurley. They don't have Scott Drew or Nate Oates. They're with Mark Pope. Here's a look at Mark Pope. And we're still working to figure out where this video came from and when it happened. But it's Mark Pope at his former post, BYU. That's where they picked him up from. Former BYU coach Mark Pope. Him showing some love to Kentucky Wildcat Nation.
It's impossible for me to describe how much I love this university, my teammates, and you fans, but I'm going to try.
He's taking his suit off right now. He was wearing a suit. He stripped his suit off.
C-A-T-S! Cats!
Wait for it.
I love you.
I love you at the end. That right there is Mark Pope. Mark Pope introducing himself to Kentucky Wildcat Nation, and he's a man who needs no introduction to the true Kentucky fans. He was part of the 1996 national championship team. He's a guy who's been in college coaching circles. They say that this is a great X's and O's guy. Mark Pope is a guy that should be able to craft up a great offense for Kentucky and lead them into the next years after John Calipari in good spirits. But when you're the Kentucky Wildcats, and when John Calipari told you he's headed out the door to stay in your conference and take over Arkansas and try and supersede what you have going on out there in Lexington, Kentucky, and you think that you have a chance at guys like Dan Hurley, Jay Wright, Nate Oates, Scott Drew, those are the names that you're flirting with publicly, we find out that with Dan Hurley, not only did Mitch Barnhart, athletic director of the University of Kentucky, not only did he publicly pursue Dan Hurley, UConn head coach, back-to-back national championship winning Dan Hurley, he did it twice. They went to Dan Hurley early on in the process, and Dan Hurley came out on the Pat McAfee show and talked about how his phone was broken, so he didn't even get the messages from Kentucky, if any were sent, to seek out his head coaching opportunity going out there to Lexington. But then after they circled the wagons and they went after Nate Oates, Alabama head coach, who brought that team to the Final Four but still thought Tuscaloosa is a better environment for him than Big Blue Nation, that's a big no. Scott Drew, Baylor head coach, who they couldn't get this dude out of Waco, Texas. And I'm from Texas. I actually interviewed in Waco for a TV job way back in the day when I was, trying to get my next step in the TV career. And Waco's cool. But Kentucky is the number one job in the nation in college basketball. And you have to feel, as Kentucky administration, as anybody affiliated with that team or Big Blue Nation, as humbled as ever, that the number one job in college basketball opens up and you have names floated around like Billy Donovan, who's with the Chicago Bulls, who literally this week, the Chicago Bulls put out one of the most humiliating pieces of film ever when you had Torrey Craig on a 3-on-none fast break, throwing the ball off the backboard, and Andre Drummond comes up behind him and tries to dunk it and end up with 0 points. Billy Donovan, who has the Bulls as the 9 seed right now, getting ready for the play-in, had an opportunity to be the coach at the number one job in the nation and likely get paid somewhere near $10 million a year to do it. He turned it down. Danny Hurley, likely the same opportunity there, going to get paid nearly $10 million a year to do it. He turned it down. And the Kentucky Wildcats are stuck with a guy named Mark Pope. And to be quite frank with you, that's not even the most humbling part of this whole situation. Because for Kentucky basketball, which has known the names of Tubby Smith, you have guys like Adolph Rupp, Rick Pitino, most recently John Calipari, has known the names of these very highly esteemed head coaches that have gone on to win national championships. The once proud Kentucky Wildcats fan base and the once proud Kentucky Wildcats men's basketball program has now been relegated to talking about social media numbers. Take a listen to this. Take a listen to this because this is from Matt Jones from KY Sports Radio. He had on, following the announcement that it's going to be Mark Pope, former BYU coach, with 0 tournament wins in his resume right now, 0 tournament wins, and also the number one thing that they lift him up to be is a Kentucky alum. Well, he was a captain on the 96 team. I don't know how good he's going to be, but we know one thing. For the number one coaching job in the nation, at best, that's a settle to get a guy like Mark Pope. Here is Mitch Barnhart on KY Sports Radio with Matt Jones, specifically answering a question about whether or not a guy that's coming from BYU who had his struggles bringing talent to BYU can bring talent to Kentucky. But in his answer, instead of talking about being the winningest program of all time, instead of talking about how high of a job and how attractive this should be to be in Kentucky and Big Blue Nation in Lexington, the dude's talking about going viral.
Can he get the players here that people think you need to win a title?
Yeah, well, I think that the proof's in the pudding. Obviously, we got to go get that done. But so I get off the phone with him last night. He already talked to me about 2 players that he couldn't get to come to have a conversation with him at BYU that already called him back and said, "Coach, I'll come to Kentucky." So it is about the name on the front. It's about the name on the front of the jersey.
Listen,
right? And there's something about that brand. So if you go back and you look at just in the social impressions from Monday at 3 o'clock until Tuesday at 3 o'clock, University of Connecticut won the national championship, obviously, and they had 17 million impressions in that 24-hour period of time. Kentucky basketball coming off something that everyone would agree is not where we want to be. In that same 24-hour period of time, we had 37 million impressions.
Cut it. If your athletic director is ever counting social media impressions, leave that to the interns. Leave that to the SID. If your athletic director is in his first interview or likely one of his first interviews after hiring your new head coach, and they're asking about why should we be optimistic about Kentucky basketball going forward with Mark Pope, and he's talking about social media impressions, CCAT, is that a good sign?
Not a good sign at all. That's when you take your girlfriend home for the holidays for the first time, and maybe you have a time alone with your aunts and uncles and cousins, or even your mother and father. And like, so what about her? What makes her think she's the one, right? And she goes, well, I don't know if you saw her Instagram. She's got 100K followers on Instagram. So yeah, I think that really writes the story itself.
I mean, hey, influencer deals, right? Like, hey, she a lot of people like her pictures. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what he's saying here. Mitch Barnhart, what he's saying is a good sign, a sign of good hope, of optimism for Kentucky basketball. And again, I don't know how good of a coach Mark Pope is going to be. I'll be honest with you, didn't watch a single BYU game, right, this year. I'm not an expert on the X's and O's of this thing. I don't know how well of a recruiter he can be. I do know how, we heard how kind of dorky he can be, which can be fun. It can sell, right? Can we get the cats again? Can we get the CATS?
CATS! Cats!
Now, I will say I'm a sucker for a good chant. I am a sucker for a good chant. So if I was one of the high school basketball players coming out and I heard a dude do that, that might get me. But I'm just saying, going from Calipari and having the number one coaching job in the nation open, and you end up with a guy like Mark Pope, Kentucky basketball should feel humbled. They should not just feel humbled, but maybe they should be the most humbled team, sport, or entity this year in all of sports. Kentucky basketball, after all of this, I don't know how many wins Mark Pope is going to stack up for them next year. I don't know how many recruits he's going to be able to get. It looks like he got a couple guys in the transfer portal from BYU to come over. Good for them. I don't know how that's going to move the needle or not. What I do know is Kentucky basketball is the most humbled program in all of the nation, in all of sports this year, and I don't think it's actually really even close. 888-760-3776, 888-760-3776. I ask you, because maybe I have this thing wrong, but who in sports has been most humbled this year? Who in sports has been most humbled this year? 888-760-3776, 888-760-3776. That's the number to call in. You can also check us on YouTube at Theo Speaking on the YouTube page, Theoretically Speaking, myself and CCAT. And let us know on the Baptist Health Hotline, 888-760-3776. Speaking of Baptist Health, are you experiencing foot and ankle pain and need to see an expert in the field? Baptist Health Orthopedic Care has a team of foot and ankle orthopedic surgeons and specialists who are regarded as leaders in their specialty. Visit baptisthealth.net/ortho to learn more today. Baptist Health Orthopedic Care combines its resources of experienced physicians and leading-edge treatments and technology to provide advanced orthopedic, foot and ankle, joint replacement, spine, and sports medicine care. Visit baptisthealth.net/ortho for more information today. Baptist Health Orthopedic Care has offices conveniently located in Palm Beach County throughout the Florida Keys. Learn more by visiting baptisthealth.net/ortho. Hit us up on the Baptist Health Hotline. Who in sports has been most humbled this year? 888-760-3776. And you want to talk about being humbled. Again, you brought up Instagram, CCAT. If I'm Mark Pope and I'm going into Mitch Barnhart's office, right, and he leaves his phone unlocked there, and I pick it up and I go to his Instagram and I check the DMs and I see right there that, oh man, well, why are you double texting a guy like Danny Hurley? Why are you double texting Danny Hurley? I thought I was your guy. Am I second fiddle? And then you scroll down some more and you see that there's a bunch of outgoing calls to Nate Oates at Alabama, but nothing returned. You're like, man, is this guy getting desperate? Do you scroll a little bit more and you see Billy Donovan's name there, and you see Billy Donovan with an affirmative hell no? Like, everybody's turning this job down. If you're Mark Pope, you got to at some point feel like, am I just the guy that accepted it? It got so bad this week, CCAT. It got so bad this week. We had guys on ESPN 106.3 radio waves, Carlin versus Joe. You hear it here, 12 to 3 every day, Carlin versus Joe. It got so bad that Chris Carlin legitimately started to have to ask the question, because nobody would take the job, and also because she's a damn good candidate for any job in this nation, if Kentucky should stop looking at men's basketball and turn its head to the star of women's basketball right now.
You look around at how Dawn Staley is being talked about and treated right now with the job that she is doing at South Carolina, and you understand, what's the phrase? Game recognized game.
That's the phrase. Good job.
Ball recognizes ball. Dawn Staley can just flat out coach. She can obviously recruit. She obviously, with all of the different things that she would have at her disposal at Kentucky, would be an amazing, amazing choice. And yes, there's a lot more of importance to it in other ways, and I'm not ignoring that. But if I'm talking about just winning and wanting somebody who can coach and wanting somebody who will be respected, Like, Dawn Staley, to me, is the right person at the right time to make this kind of a leap because of how she walks into a job like that.
Let me stop you right there, because one thing that we got lost in the sauce with all of this Dawn Staley to Kentucky stuff. Have y'all ever stopped to consider that Dawn Staley maybe likes being at South Carolina? Have you stopped to realize also what Dawn Staley means, not just to that program, but to black women at whole? Like, I'd hate to say it, Mark Pope, if that's the guy that took the job at Kentucky, Dawn Staley to Kentucky would have been a downgrade. She's got it good at South Carolina, and I'm sure she loves it in her own shoes, and she likes what she's got going on there. I love the respect for Dawn Staley. I know she can coach the men's game, but who's to say that she wants to? Everybody's acting like that's some kind of elevation for someone like that. She's chasing the goats in the women's game right now, and we should continue to let her do that in peace. 888-760-3776, 888-760-3776. That's the Baptist Health Hotline. Who has been most humbled in sports, and how is it not the Kentucky men's basketball squad? On YouTube at Theo Speaking. You can subscribe there. You can watch us live there, stream us right there. We got a couple answers in there. One of them from Amber Nicole says the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young.
How high were the Carolina Panthers thinking about themselves going into this year? That's why I don't know if that applies, because they kind of had hopes, but they weren't confident.
So you're right that their pedestal was not, it's to be humbled, you have to kind of be up on a pedestal to get knocked down. So you're right that there wasn't too high of a bar. But when you pick a guy number 1 overall in the draft in Bryce Young, and you have a head coach in Frank Reich who you think can be now this new pairing, Frank Reich, the quarterback whisperer, Bryce Young, number 1 pick out of Alabama, you're hoping that can be the future of the franchise. You're hoping that you just set in stone a team that can be contending within 2 or 3 years. And then you look and see what happened at number 2, C.J. Stroud going to the Texans, and how much success they had, a playoff win, and you end up having to fire your coach in the middle of the season, and you got your owner throwing drinks on people in the middle of games. Like, I know the bar was low for Carolina Panthers fans, but they keep pounding deeper into the ground. I think they are humble.
Yeah, it was an ugly season for sure, especially when you compare it to Bryce Young. I think there's more instances in 2023, 2024 NFL season. A lot of humbling going around. That's my little tidbit that I might get to later.
Okay, we'll get yours after the break. I want to hit a couple of the social media ones. We got Toby Schulman says, the Houston Astros, hey, Toby, too soon. Too soon. It's early. All right, you don't win championships in April in baseball. I think you do it in October or something like that. Mike McCoy says FSU football. I think that's a low blow.
Whoa.
That's a low blow. They kind of, were they humbled? I mean, in the Orange Bowl they were. I mean, yeah. They was talking a lot of talk to get whooped and smacked down in that Orange Bowl. I was in that room. I was actually sitting next to an FSU fan in the press box, and as he was yapping, the score was getting ran up on. It got ugly quick. Shout out to them Bulldogs.
Yeah, ugly is the word.
Yeah. And then I see a Joe Cronin in there from our guy Johnny Mondo. Joe Cronin definitely deserves his big heaping serving of humble pie, GM of the Portland Trailblazers. And I'm just looking forward to the day very soon when we say Joe Cronin, we don't have to follow it with that title, former GM of the Portland Trailblazers. That thing's going down into the tank. Shout out Tyree Smith who's out there. We'll see if he can't get that one-on-one when he's on the way out the door.